Hey guys, this is Brianna here to talk to you about culturally responsive differentiated instructional strategies, with mostly an emphasis on differentiating instruction. So what is differentiated instruction anyways? Well, it's a way to teach all levels of students in a single classroom. So naturally we have diversity in our classroom, but how do we teach every single student? Well, differentiating our instruction helps us do that. It also involves adapting to account for diversity. So there's a lot of diversity in our class and students at all different learning levels and abilities. So differentiating our instruction helps us to figure out the best possible way for every student to learn without it being individual. It's also about valuing the differences in a classroom and using them as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. We take a group of students who are English learners and we do not know their first language, and we make the best out of it. Rather than pushing those students to the side, we say, what's a more fun way that I can produce information for these students that all of my kiddos will learn great from, and especially my English learners will benefit from? That's what it's really about. Now, the article outlines 4 different elements that we can use in a class to differentiate our instruction. So we begin with content. How are students going to access the information we want them to have? Is it going to be through a PowerPoint? Are we using technology? Is it just a lecture? Are we showing a video? Are we reading an article? How are they getting the material? Second, it's the process. So while we're learning, what are we doing together? What kind of activities are the students participating in? We can switch that up. We can differentiate that. Thirdly, it's the products. So at the end of a unit or a lesson or just the day, how do our students show us that they understood what they learned? And we can differentiate that in so many different ways. So we could have tests, or we could have projects of all different types for all the different learners in our class, and that's what makes it great. Finally, we have learning. How do we differentiate learning? Well, through the environment. We have groups together, we have pairs, maybe rows. We have students working with each other in different scenarios that help facilitate the differentiated learning. Now, what is differentiated instruction not? It is not the same assignment for every student with different difficulties in the assignment. So, for example, it's not giving every student the same worksheet for math that has 20 questions on it and saying, everyone can do 20 questions except for you 6 students over here who aren't really doing that great in this subject, so you only have to do the first 10. That's not differentiating. That's just making things easier, but they're not learning. It's not watering down or dumbing down the material for the students who need help. We're not giving a complicated essay for students to write and then saying, for my kiddos that are really struggling, just write a few sentences, it's not a big deal. That's not instruction, that's jumping through hoops. We don't want to do that, we'll lose our students. And finally, it's not individualized instruction. It's group instruction. So differentiated instruction has students form groups. You have maybe 3, 4, or 5 in a class, and throughout the year those groups totally can change. They're malleable. We can have more students in one and less in another, and that's okay because it's based on how they learn. And as they grow throughout the year, their learning might change, and we adapt for that. That's what differentiated instruction really is. In the article, there's a graphic that shows traditional classrooms versus differentiated classrooms. And if you look it over, it's really about understanding the differences in your class and using it to your advantage. For example, right in the middle of the article where it's highlighted, it says student readiness, interest, and learning profile shape instruction. We instruct our class based on their needs, not based on our own needs. We want them to learn in the best way possible and give them options. That's key for differentiated instruction. There's a really great quote also in the article that says, "Our culture shapes our values, attitudes, beliefs, and behavior. It's an intrinsic part of who we are and how we identify ourselves. It also molds our experiences and how we interpret those defining moments in our lives. Culture is important to us, it's important to our students, and we need to make sure that in our class they can feel that." So when we differentiate our instruction by switching things up a bit, Include your students' cultures in the reading material that you're doing. Find an article by an author who's got the same background or same beliefs and attitudes as some of the students in your class. And I guarantee, or at least this article guarantees, that your students will feel like they can and are able to learn because you're working with them and their needs. Finally, here are the strategies. Get to know your students. In order to differentiate instruction, you need to know who your students are. What are their intelligences? What are their strengths and their weaknesses? Where do they come from? What's their background? That will help you. Make adjustments to the curriculum. The curriculum's probably okay, maybe it's even great, but it's not enough. Your students will not all conform to the curriculum, so you have to help it conform to your students. And finally, create a healthy and supportive learning environment, which is so important, because if our students don't feel safe in the environment that they're learning in, they won't learn. They'll shut down, and we do not want that effect to filter up. We don't. We want them to continue learning. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll read this article because it really is a great article about differentiated instruction. Thanks for watching.